Filter Free Radio, live every Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, Radio or Not, and filterfreeradio.com.
I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values.
If you're looking for filters, you came to the wrong place. This is Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean.
The time has come for America to hear the truth. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality.
Radio or Not and filterfreeradio.com.
We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society when machines and computers' profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are incapable of being conquered. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism.
And welcome. We are back, baby, as Jon Stewart would say. Kabow! We're back. Welcome to Filter Free Radio. My name is Jacob Dean. We're broadcasting live. It is January 16th. Happy Martin Luther King Day. And with me, as always, my fine, fantastic, super duper awesome mass-produced and co-host, Skeptical Scott.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on MLK Day, buddy.
Yeah, happy to be here doing my thing, trying to make it happen.
It's been 4 weeks, count them, 4 weeks, a whole month since we've been on the air live on Filter Free Radio, and
Slackers.
I'm just happy to be back. We're happy to be on the air. I couldn't go another week without doing a show. I was going crazy.
You have so much to say.
Oh my goodness, we've got so much to talk about today. We're going to spend our first hour on, as we should, MLK. I've got a whole bunch of stuff we're going to share with you, some things that you've heard, some things that you haven't heard, and or maybe you've heard it, things that most people haven't heard, and we're gonna start a conversation about conversations that we should be having. I think that was one of MLK's main prominent points. Was he said the things that nobody else said, and he said the things that needed to be said. A lot of the times, equality for all. And his war on poverty, he was a big advocate for the 99%, and I want to get into that a little bit. Also, a little bit later in the program, we're going to be diving into Occupy D.C. and what's been going on with that. A story that I've been wanting to share with you for 4 weeks now, going on a month, and there's, quote, an explosion of rats at Occupy D.C. There's sparking some health concerns. I want to focus on one of the rats in particular, Darrell Issa, representative from California. And what is Representative Congressman Darrell Issa, convicted felon Darrell Issa, up to, and why is he trying to choke out Occupy D.C. over the holidays while no one is watching and no one is looking? We're going to take off our thinking caps and put on our conspiracy theory jackets in the second hour of Filter Free Radio tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We might open up the phone lines, get your thoughts on MLK and Occupy D.C. a little bit later in the program as well. Scott, brother, we have not been on the air in a month. How you doing?
Yeah, man.
All is well?
I'm a little tired, dragging a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Did you have a good break? Good holidays and all that jazz?
It went by too fast. I like to say I didn't really have a break. I worked pretty much every day but Christmas.
Oh.
And Christmas Eve.
And go ahead.
No, that's it, dude.
Okay.
I've been working the whole time, so.
Well, that's all right. I working for Tom, of course, you probably listen to the show, and I did go back to Portland for a fantastic Christmas. We had a great Christmas, and came back, and Filter Free kind of got postponed for a week because of the Christmas holiday. I was in an airplane literally during the time that we were supposed to be on live, and then we came back, and then it was New Year's, and we ended up taking a week off for New Year's, and then I got sick last week, and which was not planned. And we were planning on doing a show last week, but lo and behold, we are back, and we are so happy to be with you. And thank you for joining us. Let's get right into some MLK good stuff. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I want to share with you. I've got a couple of clips from Mr. Kenny Pick. Thank you, Kenny, for sending along some great stuff. Dr. King questioning capitalism, asking, again, the tough questions, saying the things that no one else says, and really getting into that. The first clip that I want to play, and don't worry, we'll get to the big ones, the Vietnam. There are times when silence is betrayal. We're going to play the clip from, I've been to the mountaintop. I want to do God's will and what that means, and how, he was kind of the internal optimist. Excuse me.
Eternal optimist.
Yeah, excuse me. That's what
He probably internalized it too, but he was eternally optimistic.
I've been off for a month. Okay, you're gonna have to give me a little leeway here.
I know what you meant.
And we've got a whole bunch of great stuff, and also a clip that we played briefly there in the open, talking about undergoing a radical revolution of values, which is very important. But let's start with a clip talking about coming to the nation's capital, which is why I want to start this clip off. This is my second MLK Day in Washington, D.C. The first after the MLK Memorial has been erected now. And, Scott, you and I have been down to the MLK Memorial here in D.C.
A couple times.
And of course, there's all these celebrations and all these things going on nationwide, as well as here in D.C. at the memorial and things going on. And the clip that I want to start off playing is Martin Luther King talking about coming here to Washington, D.C., to the nation's capital, to cash a check. And I got two clips on this, so listen to this. And listen how he says, he kind of lays out, our founding fathers really laid out and promised us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What happened to that? Let's get that going.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Bingo.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
I love hearing these applauses erupt for him. And in today's world, that to me translates into, the 1% has written the 99% a bad check. The system has written us a bad check, and we tried to cash it, and it's come back with some insufficient funds. Here's the second half of that clip talking about never giving up. We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt.
But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
And the security of justice. Two words that you don't hear too often separately, let alone together anymore. Security and justice. You need your...
Yeah, I was going to say that's a Nelson laugh. I don't even need a sound effect for that.
You need a Nelson there. And again, MLK saying the things that, no one else at the time would say. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because, in a way, I feel, that one of the things we really try to do on Filter Free Radio is say the things that no one else is saying that need to be said.
Hence the name.
Hence the name. We're filter free. There's no filters. Just the way you like it, unfiltered. No. And if you're just joining us, we're going to be covering MLK Day all this hour and a little bit later on in the program as well. We'll come back to it, and we'll do a little Occupy DC. I think there's a rat from California that's really trying to take down Occupy DC. Scott doesn't necessarily think it's a conspiracy. We'll talk a little bit. We'll get more into that a little bit later in the program. But I'm calling you out, Darrell Issa. So someone's got to do it, right? But continuing on, it is MLK Day. Happy MLK Day. And we were actually debating. Should we take today off? Should we do a show? And actually, observe the holiday. And by doing the program tonight live, which we are, I just want to clarify, in no way am meaning any disrespect to anyone who would say, why aren't you guys taking a day off to observe the holiday? I understand that. It's been a month since we've done the show. And I figured I'd rather come on and play some MLK for you and talk MLK and do it justice that way rather than taking a day off. So
Plus, you did a lot of research, a lot of work, got a lot of clips. So it's appropriate. And
on that note, Scott says, get back to the clips. Got it. All right, let me ask you a question. And Scott, you were the one who brought this up to me, the fact that Martin Luther King never used the word tolerance.
That's right.
Never used the word tolerance. I want to play a clip for you, what I call the maladjusted clip. And in this, MLK lays out things that he never intends to adjust himself to. Now, while you're listening to this clip, I want you to think, and I want you to think about, and I want you to ask yourself, what would you never intend to adjust yourself to? Things like starvation wages, a broken economic system, a broken political system. What should we never have to tolerate? Think about that. Chat room, type it in. We'll read your answers in just a second. And listen to Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King.
I would like to say to you today, in a very honest manner, that there are some things in our society and some things in our world for which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I must honestly say to you that I never intend to adjust myself to racial segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few, leave millions of God's children smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society.
And if you missed that question, I'm just asking, what should we never have to tolerate? In that he says, I never intend to adjust myself to, and then, the list. But in today's language, I would, translate that to what should we not have to tolerate? Things, starvation wages, the economic system, the political system, the circus, the corporate media. What are things that we shouldn't have to tolerate? Scott, any input? What is something that you think that we should never have to tolerate?
Poverty.
Poverty. Bingo. There was a whole thing on Friday. I don't know if you missed this. All my C-SPAN lovers out there, if you missed this.
Watched it.
on Friday night, there was a whole 2-hour-long, 2.5-hour long.
It was Thursday night because you were working.
Oh, it was Thursday. Excuse me. Thank you, Scott.
It's okay, man.
On C-SPAN, there was a whole special for 2.5 hours, and you can find it online. C-SPAN is, really fair game. But Tavis Smiley had a roundtable discussion on poverty. He had Dr. Cornel West with him, Michael Moore, several other authors and activists and predominant, voices, and they did this whole 2.5-hour conversation on poverty, and how do we, really eradicate poverty, and things like that. I don't know. I mean, last week Jim DeMint was on Republican Senator Jim DeMint was on the Jon Stewart Daily Show, and
the John Daly Stewart Show.
The John Daly Stewart Show, and he said words to the effect of, we're not getting rid of poverty, we're subsidizing poverty. I got the clip somewhere, but I really don't want to play Republicans on the show anymore.
No, thank you.
And I want. Oh, by the way, that made me think of something. We have a whole new theme for Filter Free Radio for this whole year for 2012. It is the theme of revolution. We're going to get into that a little bit later.
Viva la revolution!
Viva! And so, but anyways, I digress. So the question really is, what should we not have to adjust ourselves to? And the reason why I raised this question, I played that clip, and I think that's prominently important, is because you give them an inch, they take a foot, you know, the saying, or however the saying goes.
Mile.
Yeah, you give them an inch, they take a mile, whatever. The point is, you know, little by little, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, little by little, things get a little bit worse, things get a little bit worse, things get a little bit worse. We become adjusted to these things, these little, you know, really insignificant in some ways, minor changes, we become adjusted to them. And as time goes on, ultimately, more and more and more and more things get worse, conditions get worse, our employment situations, we're working longer hours for less pay, you know, on and on and on and on.
Or not at all.
And on and on and on and on. And that is how, one of the ways that we're gamed by the system. And I think that's a big deal. I really think that's a big deal because it's harder for us to jump up and say, hey, I can't handle, you know, from A to B, or I can't handle from B to C. But as we see things go from where they once were at A to where they are now at, you know, T or Z, you know, however far we are in the alphabet,
we're pretty far down the rabbit hole.
You see what my point is, right?
Yeah.
You get my point. Is unless we, you know, act now and jump in now, while, you know, and prevent each little incremental change.
Well, at what point is your
negatively?
That's always been my question: is what's your breaking point, or to use the sales term, hey, what's it going to take? What's it going to take to put you in this car today? What's it going to take for you to fight back against the system?
In Tom Hartman's words, that would be threshold.
What is your threshold?
What is the threshold of acceptance, or what is the
tolerance?
What is the threshold of tolerance?
How much you want to take?
So
how poor you want to be? How much debt you want to bear, burden, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think we're all, a good portion of us are in debt. I know I am. But, you know, and there's very few that are not. And so, I mean, at the very least, you know, debt, just the lack of wages. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of economical issues here that basically are oppressing a majority of Americans.
And the chat room is actually trying to help me out here, and thank you, chat room. It's the frog in a boiling pot metaphor. You know, basically the frog doesn't fear or doesn't mind, you know, cold water or gradually warming water, and will stay in there until the cooking starts. Basically, is what Will said. And then he's dead. And then you're dead. And then at that point, it's far too late. And that's my point. So that's why I wanted to play.
That's actually remind me of a Derek Jensen quote, who said, you know, I think rational and reasonable people will go to the ends of the earth as long as they can believe that recycling will make a difference. You know.
All right.
I'm just saying in terms of the end of the earth and environment and things like, if we all recycle, it won't make a freaking difference.
So that whole little conversation there leads me to this next Martin Luther King clip that I want to share with you. And this comes to us from a host of Turn Up the Night here on Tuesday and Friday nights on Radio or Not, Mr. Kenny Pick. Tip of the hat. Thank you, Kenny, for the clip. And the point of this one is, all work matters. Stand up. Sometimes we forget the little people, or sometimes we forget the little contributions. Sometimes we forget, you know, the little things that we take for granted, and every single thing matters. Every time you open your mouth and you say, you know, whatever you say, that matters. Every action you do, every word you say, every, you know, work that you make, whatever you, it all matters, okay? That's my point. It all matters.
So often we overlook the worth and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth.
Basically, all work has worth. All work has worth. I like that. You know, and
Which means people should be paid adequately for their work.
right. And that leads me to the next clip. Beautiful segue, Mr. Scott. How can we live in such a rich nation and accept starvation wages? Dr. Martin Luther King.
You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages.
Yes, it is a crime. Amen to that. And also, Scott, you you grabbed this. I'll hold it up for the camera just for a second so people can see this. I'm pretty sure you cannot read this, but it's a nice, nifty graphic there. And the quote is, a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense other than, wait a minute.
Reread it again.
Okay,
buddy.
I'm sorry. My apologies. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death.
Amen.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
And that's where we are. And that basically, by the way, that's a quote prior to him being assassinated around the time where he came out against Vietnam War.
Right.
Which is pretty much where we are today.
Right.
The Vietnam War on steroids.
And you know what, actually, give me just a second, because there's a George Carlin clip that I want to play.
I was going to say, George Karl is the head coach for the Denver Nuggets. But anyway. Yes.
Just a second. Here we go. Comedian George Carlin.
You know what's interesting about assassination? Who it is we assassinate. Did you ever notice who it is? Stop to think of who it is we kill. It's always people who've told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon. They all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam! Right in the fucking head. Apparently, we're not ready for that.
Yeah.
Humor and truth, you know? Humor and the truth.
Yeah, Lava Q in the chat room points out something very valid about the, during the Vietnam War, at least the media was covering the deaths of the soldiers and the deaths of the Vietnamese, at least to some degree anyway. And we don't hear anything. When was the last time you heard something on the news about the war? Other than the troops so-called coming home from Iraq, which, you know, they're being replaced, of course, with 30,000 contractors, but, you know, the troops are coming home.
Well, I'm happy that you sent that up, because that gives us a chance to play one more clip before we go to the break. When we come back, I've got several more clips. We're gonna touch on why it's important to condemn conditions that cause riots. We're gonna visit the top of the mountain, and also talk about why we must undergo a radical revolution of values, and also let's question capitalism. Let's ask the tough questions and say the things that no one else will say. All those Dr. MLK clips will hit right after we take this quick break. And let me know if the maestro is in the chat room, because I've got something special up my sleeves tonight that we're going to play.
He's not in there.
Okay, we'll save it for later then. We can hit it on another break. I've also got a really cool song for MLK Day from our good friend Moss Henry. So we'll play that at the bottom of the hour. But you, Mr. Skeptical Scott, and Lava Q in the chat room pointed us to the Vietnam War, and actually one of my top 3 all-time favorite Martin Luther King quotes ever. This is, of course, his speech on Vietnam. He was actually preaching and talking about there are times when silence is betrayal. And I know Vic in the chat has said this before, said that quote before, and that's why I wanted to single this out. So let's hit this. I would say my number 3 favorite MLK clip of all time. And notice when he talks about how important it is to speak up, and that's exactly what we're doing here at Filter Free Radio.
The time has come for America to hear the truth about this tragic war. Now, I've chosen to preach about the war in Vietnam today because I agree with Dante that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. The truth of these words is beyond doubt, but the mission to which they call us is a most difficult one. Even when pressed by the demands of inner truth, men do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in time of war. Nor does the human spirit move without great difficulty against all the apathy of conformist thought within one's own bosom.
I reserve the right at all times to tell the truth.
Radical honesty.
Radical honesty. I reserve at all times to tell the truth. I believe that's what we should all be doing all the time.
Yeah. Well, you know, the funny thing I learned the other day about lies, people tell lies because they're uncomfortable with the truth, or they're unable to tell the truth. So they lie about it, because telling the truth would be the easy thing to do. But lying about it's hard. And you'd rather lie about it than tell the truth because you're not able to handle it. It's been my experience anyway.
And as John Stewart would say, bow! No, nothing. No, that's a joke.
Okay.
And what you said was not a joke, Scott. What you said was the shit. Okay? And we're going to leave it at that. So,
Okay.
so we will be back in just a second on Filter Free Radio. Don't go anywhere. More MLK. And got a couple of surprises up for you. So let it rip.
Giggity, giggity, giggity goo. Stick around.
Dateline, Washington, D.C. Jacob Dean presents Filter Free Radio with Skeptical Scott, live every Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time at filterfreeradio.com and radioornot.com. V for victory.
Disappointed yet again by Sunday morning political talk shows brought to you by the mainstream media? Don't let them ruin your Mondays.
Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
There's a fresh way, a filter-free way to jumpstart your news week. On Monday nights, come experience Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio.
He is the most interesting man in the world.
Finally, there's a radio talker who will arm you with the real facts, all the facts, and guide you through the labyrinth of fake news and false punditry. Each week, Jacob Dean throws out all those worn-out memes, crystallizes important issues, champions progressive causes, and features constructive solutions. That's Filter Free Radio, every Monday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, on the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, radioornot.com, and filterfreeradio.com, the official website of Filter Free Radio.
This is Rivers Rising by Mose Henry on Filter Free Radio.
He was a black man in a white man's world, where Jim Crow lived and hatred swirled. But people followed him into the street, marching and singing in the southern heat. He said the river is rising, won't be long. The river is rising, big and strong, coming down from the mountain in a mighty stream. River is rising, I have a dream. They raised their voices, you could hear them calling. They were done with waiting, tired of stalling, demanding justice and a piece of the pie, not just the crumbs or another lie. He said the river is rising, won't be long. River is rising, big and strong, coming down from the mountain in a mighty stream. River is rising. then into triumph. When he said those words, he crossed the line. He said the river is rising, won't be long, won't be long. The river is rising, big and strong, coming down from the mountain in a mighty stream. The river is rising, I have a dream. The river is rising, I have a dream.
This is Jackson Brown, and you're listening to the Nicole Sandler Show.
This is Melissa Etheridge, and you're listening to my friend, Nicole Sandler.
Hey, this is Rob with Matchbox 20.
Hey, this is Chris Isaac.
Hi, this is Suzanne Vega.
Hey, this is Trey Anastasio, and you're listening to
my friend Nicole Sandler.
Bare Naked Ladies, you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
What's up? This is Howie Day, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
Hey, this is Henry.
And I'm JoJo. And I'm Ringo. And we're Los Lonely Boys, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
This is Kelly from Stereophonics, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
This is Evan Dando of the Lemonheads, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Brooke, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
This is Pat Monahan from the band Train, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
This is Ziggy Marley, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
Hey, this is Pete Yorn, and you're listening to Nicole Sandler.
The lovely Nicole Sandler.
Nicole Sandler. Nicole is awesome.
The Nicole Sandler Show at radioornot.com. Music to my ears.
I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Welcome back to Filter Free Radio. My name is Jacob Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. We are broadcasting live from Washington, D.C. It is Martin Luther King Day. So happy to be with you. So happy to be back on the air, Filter Free Radio. We took a few weeks off there for the holidays. And
little pause for the cause.
Little pause for the cause. And Jacob got sick, but he is all better. We are 100%. We're tearing it up.
Bi-coastal travel, we'll do that too.
We're good to go. And again, I want to thank everyone for kind words and well wishes out there. It's much appreciated. We are diving well into some fine teachings of a particular revolutionary person who should be honored and remembered, and unfortunately, not just on one day a year either. But
can we talk about the sanitization of MLK too?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, I think his
talk away.
Well, no, I mean it's MLK Day. I mean you mentioned his the new monument that's in D.C. For him, and I remember a quote from Cornel West back when that thing was first erected, and he even read a whole article, and he said MLK would want a revolution, not a monument. If he were still alive today, in fact, he would be abhorred by the monument.
I think it was a New York Times story that was going to run that headline, and then they ended up they ended up scrubbing that headline because it was too
it was too edgy. They had a different headline for that, but that was the gist of the article.
Right.
So, yeah, but I mean that's the whole point of what we think of him today. And I've heard a lot of people say the idea of MLK as just a civil rights leader.
Right.
Because the fact of the matter was he was assassinated in '68, long after the civil rights had passed, about 3 years after it had passed. And his "I Have a Dream" speech was in '63, and then in '68 he was killed after actually almost a year to the day after he gave the speech against Vietnam, and basically because from what I read and from what I understand, it's fine to pick your niches, you can say poverty, you can say gay rights, civil rights, you can say women's rights. You can pick these little, what I would consider, and this probably sounds bad to say it this way, a secondary issue, because it is obviously a reflection of the larger culture and what is wrong with our society as a whole,
right,
that we have these subset of issues,
right,
whatever they may be, whatever you may think they are. And so, you're able to give, or you're able to receive a little bit, the power elites, the powers that be, the system, if you will, concedes a little bit in order to maintain that power, in order to maintain the system, as a whole.
Right.
But as soon as you turn turn your attention towards the system as a whole, it will crush you. And that's exactly what happened to MLK. I mean, when he came out against Vietnam, I believe it was Lyndon Johnson pulled the two Secret Service agents that were plainclothes that were guarding him off the detail. And then a year later to that day, he was assassinated. So that's what happens when you fight against the system directly, you know.
Absolutely. And, you know.
And I would even go as far as to use Rachel Maddow as an example, who I love. But I loved her even more when she had her show on Air America. She was edgy. She interviewed like Juan Cole, and she interviewed a lot of intellectuals and delved deep into issues.
Right.
Now she's on MSNBC. All she can talk about is gay rights. And then whatever the news of the day in terms of the political punditry world, but she can't really attack the system as a whole like she used to on her radio show. And she's been sanitized.
Well, and that's also partly to blame on the corporate media. I mean,
it's part of the system.
Right. Once you become, integrated into, once you work for someone.
Once
you're under the thumb, man.
Well, yeah, there's politically incorrect. There's things you can't say on corporate television. MSNBC's not going to put you on there and let you rail against the system and them, which I think to some degree has gotten Keith Urban off.
Right.
Off MSNBC.
Right.
So.
There are some things that you just can't say. Like on this show, there's a certain name of a certain liberal talker that will I forbid to go on air, and I will dump anytime anyone ever says that name.
I'm not even sure what you're talking about, but okay.
Whatever. I don't like Ed. Okay, I just don't like Ed.
Oh, that guy.
I'm kidding. That was horribly whatever. I've got some really good clips to play.
Let's get on with it.
And you actually, Scott, you referenced something. It wasn't until he actually really targeted poverty and economic equality.
Inequality.
Yeah. Until that's what led to eventually the assassination. This is a clip. Again, this one comes to us from Kenny Peck. Thank you, Kenny. This is a little bit long. It's about 2 minutes long. I want to play this in its entirety because there's some good stuff in here, and it's really questioning capitalism. And again, saying the things that no one else says, saying the tough things, asking the tough questions. And listen for the comment in here about water. I love it.
One day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you're raising a question about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace. But one day we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. You see, my friends, when you deal with this, you begin to ask the question, who owns the oil? You began to ask the question, who owns the iron ore? You began to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay water bills in a world that's 2/3 water? These are words that must be said. Now, don't think you have me in a bind today. I'm not talking about communism. What I'm talking about is far beyond communism. My inspiration didn't come from Karl Marx. My inspiration didn't come from Engels. My inspiration didn't come from Trotsky. My inspiration didn't come from Lenin. Yes, I read Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital a long time ago, and I saw that maybe Marx didn't follow Hegel enough. He took his dialectics, but he left out his idealism and his spiritualism, and he went over to a German philosopher by the name of Feuerbach and took his materialism and made it into a system that he called dialectical materialism. I have to reject that. What I'm saying to you this morning, communism forgets that life is individual. Capitalism forgets that life is social. The kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in a higher synthesis.
Now, there's a lot to digest there.
Capitalism forgets that we are social. That was a complicated speech. I liked it. But
hang on, let me.
heavy.
I'm re-cue it up for you here. Just that little part for you here. Here you go.
That he called dialectical materialism.
Listen to this.
I have to reject that.
Right here.
What I'm saying to you this morning, communism forgets that life is individual.
Communism forgets that life is individual. But wait, there's more.
Capitalism forgets that life is social.
Capitalism forgets that life is social.
And the kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in a higher synthesis.
More or less, we have neither.
Yeah.
More or less, we have neither. So that's just, and it was rhetoric like that later on in his life. That was from 1967.
He was killed a year later. You don't know what part of 1967?
That was August 16th.
Okay. He was killed in April of 68.
So
he didn't even last a year after that.
Not even 6 months later. Mm-hmm. It was rhetoric like that. Yeah. And the first kind of thought is, MLK was about, like you said, civil rights and about equality, across races. It was about equality across economic classes. It was about poverty. It was about the 99%. It was about people struggling.
It was about. He was a very moral. First of all, he was a minister. He was very morally based. And the good thing about, if nothing else out of religion, you get the so as you do unto the least of us, so as you do unto me. The Jesus quote. Right. And so, it's really important to remember that you're only as good. This is a terrible analogy, but the field goal kicker is only as good as his last field goal kick. Right. We as a society are only as good as the least among us. And we have people living on the streets, and we have mentally ill sleeping on heating grates. On down the line, homes. I drive by apartment buildings in my area that are vacant and have barbed wire fencing around it, and we have a homeless crisis in this area. So it's really that kind of disconnect from your brother, your other human beings, your brother. I want to say your brother, man. But those around you, and it pains me every day to walk, to work and have to pass a homeless man who asks me for money, and I feel that immense guilt. But I know that I can't give him money. I don't have any money, and if I did, who knows what he would do with it, and so on. But the point is that shouldn't happen, and you know what I mean. We should all feel as though everyone in our society is taken care of in some respect.
And as a society, we have become maladjusted to this.
Yeah. I tolerate that every day.
We have become tolerant of the intolerable.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that.
And again, I'm referencing the maladjusted clip. The clip, I'd never intend to adjust myself. We might have to play that one again. But yeah, and
I do like the lesser known clips by him, by the way.
And that leads us to eventually, once people get to the threshold of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? The threshold of
understand.
What's the word? Passivism or
What's your point, man?
My point is, eventually people are going to rise up. Eventually,
breaking point. Everyone has a breaking point.
People are going to get into the streets. People are going to rise up. We're going to see riots. We're going to see things like this.
Yeah.
Here's my next clip. Oh, Jacob, you're so good. Good segue. Good segue.
People who are voiceless and who are neglected often end up saying unconsciously, I would rather be dead than ignored. And we see this suicidal tendency in many of our riots. And the only thing that can be done now is for the nation to move on aggressively to get rid of the intolerable conditions that bring riots into being. We've got to condemn riots, but as we condemn them, we must be just as forthright in condemning the conditions that bring them into being and condemning the Congress of our nation, which can spend $80 million a day to fight a war which I consider an unjust one in Vietnam,
Afghanistan,
and yet
Iraq.
cannot even or refuses to pass a $44 million bill to get rid of the rats in the ghettos of our nation. I think the culprit must be pointed out. And the culprit in this situation is not merely the one with the Molotov cocktail.
Right. And I think the point of that is, the right is so quick to come out and condemn riots or things like that, but they never condemned the conditions and the causes that lead to the people being so upset. And whenever you ask questions, or just in general, my favorite question to ask is why. Because, you can ask what or who or how or when, and that's all significant, but I think why is the most important. And
yeah, pretend you're a 3-year-old. That's
right.
what I always tell people, tell it to me like I'm a 3-year-old, and then I ask a million why questions until someone tells me to shut up. But I mean, you were to really dig below the surface and say why to get to the point where you're like, oh, really?
Well, and that's a perfect language that you just used, Scott. Dig beneath the surface. I mean, GOP TV, Fox. When you see Occupy movements or an Occupy, whatever, it's those smelly, dirty hippies. Not a single thought about why are people upset, what has caused this.
Yeah, that goes to killing the messenger,
right?
Which was what happened to MLK.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, what you're doing is when you can't justify or you can't really attack the issues, you attack the individual.
Right.
And it's easy to do because the mainstream media can pit, left versus right. It's always, choose a team. You have two choices. Which side are you on?
Right.
I don't choose either of those. I can't stand either party, and I can't stand people who defend one or the other for that reason. Oh my God, you got to be so afraid of this side or that side. You know what? I'm afraid of the whole system. All right, because I'm not part of it. It's not working for me. And so, what are we going to do about it?
What we're doing isn't working. Clearly.
I love that quote. That's Derek Jensen too.
So we've got about 10 minutes before this hour's over. I've got a couple more clips. You know what? Let's hit the one that everyone knows, so we can say we got it in there. I played a little bumper. That was actually bumper music coming back a while. It was about 15 minutes ago. It was a song called "Let Freedom Ring" by Flocabulary, and of course features the introduction features the clip from "I Have a Dream," which was given here in Washington D.C. The steps of the Lincoln Memorial, which I've stood on the actual spot. It's marked on the ground. You can actually take a photograph of it, and it says, MLK, I Have a Dream speech, 1963. It says right there, and that's really cool. That was kind of a surreal moment to stand there on that spot and look out over, the entire National Mall and just imagine it packed full of 1 million people in the 60s.
Yeah, there's a little plaque on the ground that says MLK stood here.
How significant is that? Here's, the clip that everybody knows. I Have a Dream. It is deeply rooted in the American dream. Think about, what does the American dream mean to you? And what does the American dream mean today?
Because you got to be asleep to believe it.
Bingo.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Bingo. Economically equal.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
Now, of course, referencing slavery and the time set is completely different than from today's, situation and circumstances. But I still have to ask the question, who are today's slaves? Could you translate that clip into today's world? Who would you define as today's slaves, today's slave owners? That's
pretty easy.
It's a stretch, and I don't want to water down slavery of that time. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm simply trying to say, who would you consider slaves today? I would consider slaves today anyone in debt, student loans.
Yeah, I was going to say the risk of being hyperbolic because let's face it, slavery was pretty freaking evil.
That's my point. That's what I'm saying.
I think there's it's far more subtle these days. there's I think there's a phrase by Bob Marley that says the day they say we are free, only to be chained in poverty. As it relates to slavery, because and there's generations and generations of African Americans who have been impoverished and have no hope of ever getting out of poverty.
Right?
Because when you're in that environment, you don't go to a good school, you don't have a support system around you, et cetera, et cetera. So it perpetuates itself regardless of economics. Because of economics, rather. You are stuck in that system, and ignorance breeds ignorance. No matter who you are, red, white, black, or brown. So, we have a society of people who are disconnected, even the ones who aren't poor, and that's where we're at. I mean, everybody's disconnected from one another, and God, I can't stand running into people who think the world revolves around them in some capacity, because we do have this me society that we've generated with all this technology and all this marketing and all this PR, and if you wear this brand, if you buy this, if you're under 25 and you're a white female, you're wearing Ugg boots.
And you've got Coach purses and...
or a North Face jacket, et cetera, et cetera. So,
hey,
it's materialism writ large.
I have a North Face backpack.
Oh, you jackass.
But
but yeah, it's materialism writ large, and that's what breeds the individual.
And I mean, to go back to the question I just asked, we're in one sense we're slaves to the mighty corporations. You can't buy anything that's not, relatively anymore. That's not name brand. That's not
Well, if you can, but not in certain items.
It's more difficult to go out and buy the right things and do it the right way. It's so easy to just go to the freaking mall and buy Ugg boots and Coach purses and North Face jackets, and
assuming you have the money for it,
and RE20 microphones, and I'm just kidding.
Jesus.
But you see what I'm saying?
No.
Okay, whatever. Let's go to the next clip.
You did lose me a little bit there, but
okay.
My point in general, and I think maybe this is what you're getting at, is the fact that even I have friends who make a good bit of money, and the only thing that they live for every day is buying something. It's the instant gratification that you get from buying something new.
Yeah, and Scooter in the chat room just said it in 3 words. What I was trying to say in 3 sentences. It's Walmart's world, and we live in it.
Oh yeah,
and you don't. It's
your world. I'm just living in it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So. Amen, Scooter. You're damn right about that.
All right, let's hit my 2 last clips I want to hit before we hit the break here. I have been to the mountaintop. I want to do God's will. What I love about this clip is even though that we will always face difficulties ahead, we can never give up. We will all get to the promised land. Optimism, I just never give up. I love this clip.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Where before have we heard...
that gives me goosebumps, by the way.
Where before have we heard that I am not afraid? I am not afraid to stand up. I'm not afraid to speak the truth. I am not afraid to do what's right. I am not afraid to be afraid. Where have we heard that before? Yeah. Oh, I know. Pick me. I have the clip.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance.
The point, never, ever be willing to subdue your beliefs and your opinion and your stance for any reason.
Fear is a psychological weapon of choice for totalitarian systems of power. Make the people afraid, get them to surrender their rights in the name of national security. And that's where we are today.
There we go. We've got time for the last MLK clip. And don't worry, if you missed any of these or anything, if you want us to revisit any of this, let me know in the chat room. We'll check it over the break. We'll come back. We're going to be talking about Occupy D.C. And what the heck is Darrell Issa doing, trying to stranglehold, trying to choke out one of the most predominant and remaining Occupy movements in the country.
I'd like to talk about Occupy and resistance as a whole as well.
Yeah, and there's big Occupy news going on today, National Day of Action. We're going to cover that. But first, I've saved what, in my opinion, what I have the best for last, as I like to do because I'm like that. Dr. Martin Luther King, happy MLK Day. Talking about a radical revolution of values, something that Filter Free Radio holds very near and dear to its heart.
I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society when machines and computers' profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are incapable of being conquered. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism.
And I got to say, it is glad to be back on the air. Jacob Dean, Skeptical Scott with you. We're Filter Free Radio. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of two mockeries, of a sham.
Dateline, Washington, D.C. Jacob Dean presents Filter Free Radio with Skeptical Scott, live every Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time at filterfreeradio.com and radioornot.com. V for victory.
Have you been waiting for a show that gives you the real news you need to know? Have you been waiting for a show that reports the truth and isn't afraid to call it as it is? I've been waiting for that show too, and it's not coming from the mainstream media. It's not coming from the bought and sold corporate media. It's not coming from the news networks that only look out for profits and their bottom lines. They all speak through filters. That's why you need filter-free news. That's why you need filter-free radio. Filter-free radio is your new news headquarters for exactly what's going on and just exactly what we need to do about it. We must move forward. Move forward with us. Filter-free radio, live Mondays 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, radioornot.com, and the all-new filterfreeradio.com.
You're listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News Service. I'm Jesse Russell. Today marks the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In honor of his memory, we'll be dedicating this newscast to a documentary produced by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Workers called I Am a Man, Dr. King and the Memphis Sanitation Strike.
It really sort of provided the classic kind of confrontation between striking workers with nothing more than a picket sign and realistically what was the might of the armed forces of this city. And it was frightening in one aspect, and where the least bit of wrong action could really have triggered a situation that would have been tragic for many people.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights.
At the time that I heard the news of Dr. King's death, we were still struggling to arrive at an acceptable compromise. So many times in issues of this type, a little bit more leadership, a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more vision, and a little bit more flexibility would enable you to deal with a problem. And yet, this time we were not, and we had to have the tragedy to bring us to our senses.
City of Memphis recognizes the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO, Local 1733, as a designated representative for certain employees in the Division of Public Works.
The day this strike was over, that was the best part of my life.
All in favor of the recommendation, let it be known by saying aye.
And I'm telling you the truth. You talking about a bouquet. It was black, white, they tied up on that stage, hugging and crying and hollering.
I win a whole lot in this strike because respect, that's the most important thing. They respect you as a man.
Got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
You've been listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Baseball Hall of Famer Ted Williams once offered this advice to rookies. If you don't think too good, don't think too much. Mitt Romney would do well to take Ted's tip to heart. The GOP presidential frontrunner thought he could win the votes of workaday Joes and Jolenes by touting his experience as a successful businessman. Indeed, Mitt was a sterling success at raking in a $250 million fortune for himself as top dog at his Wall Street investment outfit, Bain Capital. But what he didn't think about is that Joe and Jolene might not like the way he got so rich. You see, Romney got his by taking theirs. Through Bain, he took over corporations where thousands of Joes and Jolenes worked, sold off the best chunks of their companies to grab a quick personal profit, eliminated their jobs, and left their companies in bankruptcy. Romney didn't think this would be exposed so early. But there it is. So he had to think of some way to stop the scathing criticism he's now getting, even from Republicans, about the wealth inequality that rapacious financial hucksters like him have been creating. He thought, and then it came to him. It's about envy. I'll just say that anyone who questions us 1%ers are just envious of our success. So, this multimillionaire recently went on national television to wail that he's a victim of, quote, a very envy-oriented politics of class warfare. He even went so far as to assert that such criticism of financial barons like him, quote, is entirely inconsistent with the concept of one nation under God. But wait, asked the interviewer, isn't it fair for America's hard-hit people to demand a presidential policy debate about the obvious and ever-widening wealth gap dividing our country? To that, without thinking at all, Romney said, I think it's fine to talk about those things in quiet rooms. This is Jim Hightower saying, yes, people, go to your rooms and be quiet. You're disturbing Mitt's train of thought.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Filter Free Radio, live every Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, on the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, Radio or Not, and filterfreeradio.com.
I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values.
If you're looking for filters, you came to the wrong place. This is Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean.
The time has come for America to hear the truth. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality.
Radio or Not, and filterfreeradio.com.
We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society when machines and computers' profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are incapable of being conquered. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism.
We are proudly recapturing the revolutionary spirit. Welcome back to Filter Free Radio, Occupy the Airwaves. My name is Jacob Dean. So happy to be with you and back live on Filter Free Radio. And as always, we have I have with me my fantastic co-host, Mr. Skeptical Scott.
Hello.
Thank you.
And good to be back on the air, man. I'm just happy to be here. And happy MLK Day to you. And hopefully we covered we filled your MLK quota for the first hour. We can come back to that a little bit later. Also, we might be able to. We're going to see if we can make it happen. We might be able to open the phone lines a little bit later in the program and get your take, get your thoughts on MLK. What is there anything? The question I really want you to call in and answer is there anything that you think we should no longer tolerate? And we can play that clip coming back to being maladjusted a little bit later. But
I don't like to tolerate self-checkout.
They're outsourcing the work to you.
Exactly. That's just a microcosm of the big picture. But I like to use that one because every time I go anywhere and they want me to self-checkout, Home Depot or the grocery store, it's just like, really? You don't even put bags in. Remember how I used to have people on the porch bagging your groceries, loading your car,
right,
checking you out. Now you have to do that's 3 jobs that you have to do right now just to go grocery shopping, and the price of food is not lower than it used to be. So that's those are the sort of things I don't tolerate. I mean, I refuse to go through the self-checkout line. And I think that's just a small, there's a million little things like that, okay? That's just the one thing that comes up to me every day.
So let's get your thoughts on that. Think about it. Sit on it for a little while. We'll come back maybe in a half an hour or so and get your thoughts on that.
Okay.
Okay. That's the Jacob Dean drinking game.
Okay.
By the way, anytime Jacob Dean says okay, that's a drink. So everyone out there drinking, I have water.
Okay.
Anyways, there's a story that I've been itching to get at and to get on Filter Free Radio and to cover for 4 weeks, for an entire month now. I was ready to do this story the following week from the last time we actually did a show, Scott. I was reading it in the newspapers, in the local. Everything okay there?
I'm good. Keep going.
Okay. I was reading this story a month ago. And what aggravates me is the fact that everyone, I was scanning the interwebs on Sunday, yesterday, and all these news sites, everybody's coming out in the last 2 or 3 days saying, oh my goodness, look at what's going on. And I'm saying, hello, it's been going on for a frickin' month, if not longer. And what
the revolution will not be televised.
And what I'm speaking of is Occupy DC. That we've been covering Occupy on this program ever since, October 1st, when I went down to Occupy D.C. on day one and saw President Obama, which was sweet. But
that was really, looking back on the way things have progressed, how cool is that to be there on the first day, right?
Right. And a little bit of backstory real quick about Occupy D.C. You might have noticed over the last month or so, I mean, we're already, 3 months, well into 3-4 months into this Occupy movement here in the United States. And the kind of common theme that's been going around the nation recently is camps are being evicted. Camps are being shut down for different reasons. Some partisan, some health concerns, some,
Yeah. Let's not forget the National Mayor's Conference call that was set up by the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes, there's been, sabotage. Absolutely.
No, I'm talking about the actual. Remember how the mayor of Oakland said she was on a conference call with like 13 other mayors?
Oakland Mayor Jean Quan. Also, Portland Mayor Sam Adams was on that call.
Right. But that's not a conspiracy.
Well, no, not at all. But something that's been going on nationwide is all of the Occupy camps have been shutting down. And it definitely has not been happening in Washington, D.C. The Occupy D.C. movement has had, up until recently, its support of local officials, of people like the mayor here in Washington, D.C., Mayor Vincent Gray. Even what was it, back in April, just to give you an idea of the D.C. mayor, Mayor Gray was arrested in an unrelated to Occupy Wall Street, in an act of civil disobedience back in April that was pertaining to D.C. voting rights. But still, we have a very activist mayor here in D.C. And all of a sudden, Mayor Gray has kind of changed his tone on the Occupy movement here in Washington, D.C., most significantly on last Thursday, calling on the National Park Service to remove protesters from McPherson Square, which is Occupy D.C., to, quote, allow for elimination of the rat infestation cleanup and restoration of the downtown park. Now, just a little bit of backstory. The National Park Service is actually in control of McPherson Square, the site of Washington, D.C. They have jurisdiction over the park. It is up to them, really, to decide whether or not they allow the protesters or they can kick them out. They can evict the park. And all of a sudden, the mayor of D.C., who up until just recently has been very supportive of the movement, not so much anymore. Why could that be, you ask? Well, they did cite, quote, an explosion of rats, a rat infestation, and I want to talk about one rat in particular. That's Darrell Issa. He is a representative from the state of California. He is a convicted criminal. I suggest you Google Darrell Issa. For a long time, he's actually the richest man in Congress. But that was he's recently been surpassed. I think he's number 2. But the fact he's a criminal. So I just want to lay that out really quick.
Why is he a criminal?
That's a good question, Scott. Do you know? I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't. I was trying to look it up while you're talking, and I couldn't.
I know someone in the chat room is going to chime in just a second and let us know what Darrell Issa was busted for. But in the meantime, the real story here is 4 months or a month ago, 4 weeks ago, a Congressional Oversight Committee launched an investigation into whether the National Park Service was allowing the occupiers to camp on federal parkland illegally or not. Can you guess who was behind that? Well, it was the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, which oversees the district. They were the ones who launched the investigation into why the Park Service is allowing the occupiers to stay at McPherson Square, Occupy D.C., where they've lived without a permit since October 1st. The person behind that, you ask? Representative Darrell Issa, the Republican from California. Issa says that the occupiers have torn up $400,000 in new sod and other improvements made to the park recently.
Yeah, that's got to be bullshit, dude. The park's not that big, and $400,000 for some sod is just—it's impossible.
On December 12th, Darrell Issa wrote a letter to Ken Salazar, who's the Secretary of the Department of Interior, and that's the agency that oversees the Park Service. Darrell Issa wrote, and I quote, "This situation raises questions about why those decisions were made, who participated in making them, and whether political judgments played a role in not enforcing the law." Jacob, why are you making a big deal about this? Let me tell you why I make a big deal about this. There was a story in the Washington Post. It was published on December 17th by Ann Gowen. It was titled, "As Occupy D.C. Movement Grows, So Does Tension." And in this article, they actually went back and dug up all of kind of the backstory to this, which I want to share really quick with you. And that is, let's see here.
By the way, we do have a rat problem in D.C. So
yeah, his name's Darrell Issa.
No, I mean seriously.
Oh, okay. Okay, that aside, we'll talk about we'll talk about that in just a second, Scott. We'll get there. But
let's go while we're young.
Right. Okay. Mara, I'm going to mangle this name, Verhinden Hillard, a lawyer for a nonprofit partisan for Civil Justice Fund, said that in the matter of whether or not overnight camping on federal parkland is protected speech, that was litigated in the 1980s when a legendary anti-poverty activist, Mitch Snyder, organized a tent city in Lafayette Park called Reaganville. Now, the resulting court case of this, which was Clark versus Community for Creative Nonviolence, this went to the Supreme Court in 1984. The Supreme Court ruled that the Park Service has the right to limit overnight stays on parkland without infringing on speech. So if the Park Service wanted to evict everyone in Occupy D.C. at McPherson Square, they can do so without infringing on free speech. And the article goes on to say, our argument was that putting up a tent in Lafayette Park was protected speech because it spoke to the nature of homelessness and poverty and people living on the streets. And of course, the courts found that putting up a tent was protected speech, but sleeping in it was not. And so, and there's also another note here. Business leaders around the site at Occupy DC have raised some questions about sanitation and safety around the camps. Of course, they do because they're concerned about the profit, about the money coming in. So the big picture here, and it's summed up by, oh no, I cut off the quote at the end of the story. Hang on, I got to pull this quote up because that was really, really, really important. But
Are you talking about the one that says our argument is that putting up a tent in Lafayette Park was protected speech because it spoke to the nature of homelessness and poverty?
No, I already read that. It's the very end of the article that got cut off on this print job. But long story short, they interviewed a occupier at Freedom Plaza, which is the other site in Washington D.C., and he was saying that people are waking up all over the country to the fact that Washington D.C. is where the power and the money are. This is the epicenter. This is why there's such a movement, such a strong movement of Occupy in Washington, D.C. This is also why the movement has not been shut down yet in Washington, D.C. This is also why people nationwide are coming to Washington, D.C. to continue to participate in the movement and to be a part of it in the epicenter of where the power and the money and the corruption is, which is Washington, D.C. Okay? As a drink.
I almost hit that button. I didn't.
So you see what I'm saying here? So now let's take off. I'm going to take off my thinking cap for a second and put on my conspiracy theory jacket.
I don't care.
I think, now, the timeline of this is crucial. Follow me on this. It was a month ago, around the week of December 5th, right before the holiday elections, that Darrell Issa launches an investigation into why, Occupy DC is still existing. Why hasn't the Park Service shut it down? Okay, no, that's another drink. And so that happened in about mid-December, right? Right before everyone goes on vacation for a couple of weeks. No one pays attention to the news. And I'm wondering why the timing. Why did Issa do this right before the holidays? And then on top of all of that, last Thursday you have the mayor of D.C. who has up until this point been supportive of the movement. He was arrested back in April in an act of civil disobedience himself. Why is he writing a letter now to the Park Service saying, asking for the Park Service to evict everyone from McPherson Square? I think there's something going on here. What do you think? I'm curious. I really think there's something going on here.
My gut says maybe.
Exactly. And I'm just, that's been bugging me for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I wanted to share that with you because I thought that was important.
We're one of the few vestiges of the Occupy movement left that's encamped anyway. I mean, there's still the Occupy movement exists in many fashions in many different cities, and they do have GAs regularly. At least a good bit of them do, but they don't always necessarily have a space.
And it's so important for the movement to have an occupation in order for the movement to be seen, to be heard, to be relevant. I think that's really important. You can't, as movements, some movements are saying, maybe we should move inside, and you can't, we can't drop the ball. The point is, you can't drop the ball right now because in spring this shit's going to set on wildfire, and the movement's going to be back in a heartbeat.
I'm excited for warm weather. Let me tell you,
the people are going to be there. It's going to. You just watch. Mark my words. Come springtime, the Occupy movement is going to boom.
Yeah. And I've actually heard quite a few people suggest about protesting the elections in some fashion. I mean, granted, I know the city of Charlotte is becoming militarized for the Democratic convention because the Occupy Charlotte and several Occupy movements are planning on protesting outside the Democratic convention, among other places. So, and I believe the Republican convention's in Tampa this year as well. And they're planning on doing that as well. So there's a lot of planning going on. I think the important thing to remember about the Occupy movement in general is that it's sort of a blessing in disguise to be I guess decamped, if you will, because I can't think of a better term for it. But what it's doing is it's allowing the organizers and people who are involved on a day-to-day basis to sort of make plans and plan for what's going to happen this summer and in spring when we have time to actually get to the streets, or not time necessarily, but the actual weather and the ability to get, kids are out of school in the summertime. I think that's going to be an important factor. And there's a lot of other factors involved that are prohibiting us from actually getting on the streets right now. But hopefully that will change, and we'll see.
And real quick, right back to Occupy DC, Steve Whitesell, he's a regional director for the National Park Service National Capital Region. He says that although camping is prohibited at the two parks, they believe that the protesters' First Amendment rights allow them to maintain a, quote, 24-hour vigil at the sites. And then he goes on to say, quote, at this point we have no plans to close the camps, end quote. But they might decide at any time that they deem that they are non-compliant with the rules and regulations in the parks that they can shut them down. Absolutely. I agree with that. But I think that there's something really fishy going on here, and no one's talking about it. It's
because you won't know until it happens.
Right. And I've been screaming about this for 3 weeks now, saying, what the hell's going on with Darrell Issa? Why is Darrell Issa, a representative from California, trying to get his toes in a freaking D.C. pot here? You see what I'm saying? And that bothers me. And now all of a sudden our activist mayor all of a sudden is like, time to call it quits on the, right around the same time that Issa launches this investigation.
I think you're giving Mayor Gray too much credit.
Okay.
He's corrupt as hell, dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my point is the man was arrested in April participating in civil disobedience.
Oh, yeah, that surprised me.
Every single statement that I've read between October 1st, which was day one of Occupy DC, and now up until last week, anytime the mayor was asked about the Occupy movement or protesting or anything, he's always been along the lines of, I support their First Amendment right of free speech. I support what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. Now, all of a sudden, ISA launches the investigation. Mayor calls on the Park Service to evict them, and they're blaming it all on rats. Yeah, I think there are two rats going on right here. Darrell Issa and Mayor Gray. And, so whatever. But on the other hand, if I'm just, conspiracy theory, I'm totally off on this. If the truth is that the park is indeed facing an explosion of rats, and there are health risks and hazards to the people, I think the priority is to keep people safe. And the beauty of Washington, D.C. with the Occupy movement is there are two camps. There are two camps. So they could theoretically move everyone from the one camp that they want to evict and clean up. Of course, by the way, the mayor and everybody who's saying that they want to evict the camp is for cleaning and restoration purposes. That's the reason why they want to kick everyone out of the camp, is to clean it up, restore the blah, 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 blah. Will they let the people back? That's a different question.
Doesn't the cover of the paper you have in front of you say that they're going to move them to Freedom Plaza? Because of the two camps, one obviously has rats and one doesn't. So they want to move everybody to Freedom Plaza, which is a concrete slab on Pennsylvania Avenue, about 2 blocks from the White House, and aptly named Freedom Plaza. But there's no problems there. You don't hear anyone talking about them.
Yeah, and this is again the weekend edition of the Examiner, which is the right-wing freebie newspaper here in Washington, D.C. The screaming headline on the front page: Rats, Mayor Gray requests McPherson cleanup, wants all occupiers moved to Freedom Plaza. I see absolutely no problem with getting all the campers to move to the other camp. They clean up the park. They make it, good to go. They clean out the rats. Then they let them come back, and maybe redefine some rules, whatever, to help, keep the park okay. You see what I'm saying?
I don't know what you're putting down.
Okay. Maybe I'm going too deep into this.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay.
No, I mean, it is in a much larger picture, if I may. I think two things. One, it's exceptional that we have two occupied camps here. I mean, most cities don't even, don't have that. If they do have one, it's certainly not two. And also, you're going to see I've said for a long time, and I think we can all agree that until we have massive protests of people in the streets, I would really call for a general strike on a nationwide boycott. Everyone doesn't go to work for, I would dare say a couple of days if you can afford it, at the very least, until we get our, demands met. Obviously being in full employment and things of that nature. Pick your topic. But my general point is that we have the ability to, consolidate in D.C. So if we had to, we could.
Absolutely. And Skeptical Scott has spoken.
I hear the music. I know it's time to stop.
Oh, you're well trained. No, that's quite all right. And we'll continue this conversation. Let's open up the phone lines. We'll hear from you. I want you to comment on MLK if you're interested, or the conversation about Occupy D.C. and what's going on. You think I'm up to something? You think I'm on to something here? Give us a call, 1-866-745-2667. We'll take your calls next on Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
My face is on
I'm Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio, and you're listening to Turn Up the Night with Kenny Pick.
Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. See the strangest show in the galaxy. All right, here we go. Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
It's okay to be nervous. I still either throw up or get the runs before every show. Last night it was both.
It may seem weird to you, but there is a reason behind everything that we do here. We provide people with a very important and sacred service.
You understand me?
I get it.
Yeah, I mean, if you get it, then you turn it up.
Don't really want to join a little freak show. Just looking for some information, so if you could point me in the right direction, it'd be great.
Live every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern on the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, RadioOrNot.com, and KennyPick.com.
Weigh your options regarding hallucinations over the phone. No joke. It's a penny for your thoughts, a dime for your mind. No one cares if Satan is in the smokestacks or that electric spider webs are weaved by the lampposts. You may have figured out how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, but that doesn't give someone a job or comfort them as they watch a street vendor set himself on fire during the local 9 o'clock news. Bahrain, Greece, Tahrir Square, UC Davis, Rio de Janeiro, Pakistan, Fukushima, Joplin, Oslo, Zuccotti Park, Syria, Oakland, Libya, Dorley Rainey, Christina Taylor Greene, Steve Jobs, Muhammad Bouazizi, etc., etc., etc. This year hasn't been an illusion orchestrated by some sick, omnipotent magician. No trap doors or sleeves full of tricks or stupidity performed on television to increase some reject's net worth by 5%. You can't escape that the world is full of 7 billion humans and counting who we can't possibly feed, shelter, or protect. No amount of pills, plants, powders, or potables will make these facts vanish. Trust me, I've tried and I still wake from dreams of Armageddon drenched in cold sweat. This is no time to be wrapped up in trivial pop star, vampire, bullshit, 2-week marriages. Open your eyes and ears. Occupy your mind. Be here. Engage. Live for others, friend, family, or stranger. You can wrap yourself in blankets of manufactured pleasure parading as enlightenment. Go for it. But do not feel as if your uniquely uniform experience deserves a neon marquee text message or TV special on Discovery. No news means you're not paying attention, and the world will burn anyways.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean on Radio or Not. Live every Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. FilterFreeRadio.com.
The time is now. Did somebody say a revolution? Or is it all in my head? Is that what it takes to make a solution? Or did somebody say a revolution? Or is it all in my head? Is that what it takes to make a solution? Your revolution.
And welcome back to Filter Free Radio. My name is Jacob Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. Our theme of Filter Free Radio for the entire year of 2012 is revolution. It is revolution. And I'm going to be featuring revolution songs, at least one a show per show, every show for the rest of the year. I want to talk about revolution. I want to talk about big picture ideas. When I say things like revolution, I mean revolution of the mind, revolution of mindset, of ideals, of institutions.
Culture.
Of culture, a culture revolution. Revolution in the nonviolent sense.
What's Matt Taibbi's quote about culture? Culture strike.
Yeah, culture strike. Yeah. That is exactly what Occupy DC is. That is exactly what Occupy DC is. It's a culture strike. It is a strike on the culture of which the culture of the striking that you strike.
Yeah, speaking of strike, is a hell of a good segue, by the way, because I just want to mention that, and I'd like to personally cover a few issues that are going on around the world, because I think it's important to realize that there is a global revolution going on. I think it's fascinating as hell to hear different people, different intellectuals. Obviously, Chris Hedges being my favorite, and things of people who were originally, and I know I was too, scared to use the word revolution because the word itself is anachronistic. Revolution, everyone thinks of violence instantly, so that the word's loaded. But when you're able to sort of to re-own, I think it's important for us to for us to own words and define them ourselves, and say that when we mean revolution, we mean a change in this current structure of things.
And don't be intimidated to use something that's something else. You see, I mean,
words are just words, but at the same time, you have to justify what it is you're talking about to people, and everyone likes to hear buzzwords that catch that's what you mean, when things are far more nuanced and convoluted than just buzzwords. So it's hard, and you say revolution, you're like, I don't want to have violence, but no, it's not what we're talking about, of course. We're talking about nonviolent revolution in the most, militantly nonviolent sense, which I think is a really good way to say we're militantly nonviolent.
There's I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, man.
Well, I was going to say there's a little bit of news of the day that I think we should at least mention briefly.
Yeah. That's what I was getting to.
WikiLeaks, or not WikiLeaks, Wikipedia rather. Wikipedia is going to go blank. Scott, you were just telling me about this over the break.
Oh yeah, Wikipedia on the homepage of Wikipedia right now. It says, if I can get back to it, I don't know what happened to it, but on the homepage of Wikipedia it says that tomorrow in 29 hours Wikipedia will go black in protest of SOPA and PIPA. SOPA is the Stop Online Piracy Act.
Not to be confused with SOAP, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. And I forget the PIPA. I don't know what that acronym is for, but it's the Senate's version. SOPA's the House version, and it's obviously it's anti-net neutrality. I mean,
right.
The hard thing is to say to people we're becoming a military state. You know, because I said to my father, and he's like, "Yeah, we're not, you know, Somalia, we're not anything like that, obviously." But yeah, well, we're sure as hell headed in that direction. We're not headed the opposite direction, you know, at the very least. And so, clamping down on liberties, you know, is becoming a problem.
This is what a police state looks like.
Amen, brother. You know, and it was what's Ben Franklin's quote: "Those who sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither, and will lose both."
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's sort of where we are right now in the much larger sense, and you just sort of exemplified that with the crackdowns of the, you know, Occupy movement nationwide, and so I think it's important too. One of the things I learned from reading the Time magazine article about, you know, the called protester, the man of the year, the protester. I think it really just exemplifies, if you had a chance to read that really lengthy article, and other articles like it. And I think, just a side note, that's one of the things I liked about Maestro's poem we just heard, was where he itemizes on a global scale what, you know, the people who've sacrificed and the events that brought us to this point. So, you know, with that in mind, it's worth pointing out that today, for example, Romania enters its 5th day of anti-austerity protests. So there's thousands of people braving freezing temperatures in Romania to protest the austerity measures, and it's coming to the U.S. Believe me, I mean, everyone's trying to push, you know, cutting social services in order to balance the budget or whatever, get out of the deficit, whatever the excuse is, you know. And then the NDAA, which very few people talk about, which I'd be remiss if we didn't mention every show, the National Defense Authorization Act that was signed, by the way, on New Year's Eve. You mentioned earlier, Jacob, about why did Darrell Issa pass this over the holiday, or, you know, submit this bill, whatever it is, over the holidays. You know, our officials do these on what they call document dumps, you know, on Fridays or on a holiday weekend or New Year's Eve when no one's reading the news. And by Monday, which is a whole 3 days later, or even Tuesday, which is by the time people really get back to work, it's gone. It's a whole other news cycle, you know, and no one talks about it. But the NDAA, which brings me to my next point, which, if anyone has a chance to go to truthdig.com today and check out Chris Hedges' new article. His new article is titled, "Why I'm Suing Barack Obama." And so apparently Chris Hedges has filed a brief in the U.S. District Court in New York City to sue Barack Obama because of the Military Authorization Act. And it's in a nutshell, it's illegal, and it's entirely against our civil liberties and our democracy. And so it's refreshing to see other people standing up and fighting back against these sorts of things. But the National Defense Authorization Act is really, you know, it allows us to be all put in Guantanamo. We are all Bradley Manning because of it.
If you're wondering about the NDAA, I think the person who's covered it best is Jon Stewart on the Daily Show.
He really has, ironically.
And I strongly suggest you go back over the last week or 2 weeks of Daily Show shows, which you can watch, you know, every single episode in its entirety on the website.
He even did a really good piece before Christmas.
Go back and watch that, because I think Jon Stewart's covered that better than anyone else.
Yeah, his mockery of it shows.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, really. I can't believe he's the one that talks about it and nobody else talks about it.
And ultimately, it comes, you know, I mean, back to, bottom line is people like us who say the things that we do because we care about the truth, we care about the conditions, we care so much that we're actually willing to go against the grain and speak the truth that we hold.
Yeah, but we're allowed to do this because we're not getting paid.
Right, of course.
We're doing this as a hobby on Monday nights for 2 hours, and whatever other research we do and put it in the show. Right. We're not getting paid.
Right. We should change the website to .org. I'm pretty sure we can get that.
That requires spending more money for something we're not getting money for.
But
both of us are poor as shit. But I mean, you know, the point is that we're able to because we don't have conflicts of interest.
You jogged my memory there, Scott, for a second. Fox has a new show called Two Broke Girls, just for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
You know, and I haven't seen the show. I really don't know what it's about. But it's like, to me, I mean, just the title is kind of glorifying poverty. It's kind of becoming adjusted to poverty.
It's like the show Outsourced. Remember how they made a comedy show about outsourced? Like, hey,
that was NBC.
Yeah, isn't it funny that all our jobs are going to India? Let's do a sitcom about it. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Right. I mean,
pardon my French.
If anything, this show should be called Two Broke Guys. But anyways,
but the point is that it's what's the word you're looking for? You use the word adjusted. It's sort of neutering or neutral. tolerating. It sort of ingrains you to tolerate and accept things for what they are, as they are, rather than go, well, why is this show? I mean, I think art imitates life, and in some respects, the reverse is true. And so here we are. We have TV shows that people want to see because it fits their lives. Everyone's broke. Everyone can relate. So let's make a show about it.
We do have a caller on hold. Caller, but we will get to you in just a second. I want to give out the number one more time in case you're interested in joining our conversation. 866-745-2667. Give us a shout. Toll free. It is MLK Day. We'll talk MLK. We'll talk Occupy or other news of the day. And real quick, I want to mention tomorrow, because we were talking about Occupy DC. Tomorrow, there's a kickoff rally here at the Capitol in Washington DC. Kind of Occupy the Capitol, Occupy Congress. Occupy DC tomorrow is going to spend its first day of action in more than a month with a scheduled rally at Capitol Hill. Event organizers have promised thousands of supporters. They're kind of determining how the movement's going to go forward.
Occupy Congress, which is part of Occupy. It's actually part of Occupy Wall Street that's organized this,
and it's helping to kind of jumpstart the momentum, jumpstart the movement rather, which has lost momentum. And it's colder outside, so again, don't drop the ball right now. Don't give up. That's kind of the message. That's kind of the mantra right now. Don't give up. And come springtime, we will see an Occupy.
These things come in waves. They come and go. They ebb and flow. They're not constant and persistent and linear, if you will. Things are kind of, there's highs and there's lows. But as long as we continue to push and continue to to reach out there for something better, something newer, something different, I think it's important to note. And also too, you mentioned earlier. I want to go back to I guess it was the Remaking America, America with the Poverty panel by Tavis Smiley.
Yeah,
which I had a chance to watch. Which, if you do get a chance, Google it. It's on C-SPAN. I'm sure you can watch it online or it's rerun. The panel consisted of Michael Moore, Cornel West, and a bunch of other people. Susie Orman was actually on there too.
Right.
But when I got a chance to watch it, Roger Clay mentioned something where he said, I don't want to go back to anything. Everyone's sort of nostalgic, looks back at what part in time do you want to go back to where things were better? Obviously, things were better financially for most people, I would say, or a good bit of people in the 90s. Let's go back, roll back the Reagan tax cuts, right? And he points out, he goes, I don't want to go back to anything because I want to go forward. I want to look back and see what was right, what was wrong, and then I want to go forward. But I don't want to go back to anything because there's always a time and place where people were suffering and other people are doing well, and we want to go forward to a time and place where everybody's doing well and the least amount of people are suffering, if not at all. And so I think it's important to re-envision or just envision something new and something different that sort of pulls from everything that we are today.
Amen. In Jesus' name, boogity, boogity, boogity. Amen, Scott. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Let's go to the phone line. Caller in the 708 area code. You're live on Filter Free Radio.
Hello, Will from Chicago calling. Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year, Will. Right back at you. Good to hear from you, bud.
Hey, Will, thanks for calling.
Good. Some thoughts. It's been said by a number of people that Dr. King's legacy is often portrayed one-dimensionally as just civil rights, as if he can be just packaged in a neat little box that will offend hardly anyone, with the possible exception of Pat Buchanan. Sorry. But he was a man who was active for peace and for the rights of labor. And we can't forget that. As the things that we should not tolerate, I would say we should not tolerate blind hatred of anyone or any group. I may disagree completely with the current policies of the Republican Party and have opposed the policies of the Bush administration. But I was never one to actually hate them. I might have thought we need to follow the processes of the law and look into things. But sadly, too often I see in our society hatred against ethnic minorities, racial groups, religious groups, and sometimes it's not only from the right. I like to say, as a person who considers himself pro-peace, pro-Israel and pro-Palestine and the Middle East conflict, someone who wants to see a two-state solution, I have the joy of being yelled at by those who associate themselves with the right in the Israel can do no wrong school and have dealt with people on the Israel can do no right and Palestinians can do no wrong.
Well, you can't you can never please everybody all the time, but you
no.
But
no, my reaction is I will judge you on the merits of your arguments. If you go to the point where you are either inventing facts or will say side acts is as bad as Stalin and Hitler's Russia, I will kindly ignore you and move on to the real issues. And I think that's perhaps one thing we ought to look at some of the fanatics in our own midst in our society, namely that not so much that we will not ignore those dangerous people who are preaching hate, but say their intellectual arguments mean nothing. I mean, consider this.
Yeah. Well,
as many problems as Occupy Wall Street has had, there was no one holding pictures of Mitch McConnell as a primate, other than a human.
Right, which I think is very important too. You touched on something that I struggle with on a regular basis because I use that term casually. I'm like, oh my God, I hate this traffic, or I hate whatever. And hate is a really wasted emotion. I mean, if you have any energy at all, which I have very little of, hate just takes too much energy out of me. And it's important not to hate anybody, but to at least empathize and even if you had to pity somebody.
Sure.
Because people who are wrong and who are angry and who may even draw your own ire or your resentment toward them or whatever. It's not worth hating them because it's their problem, it's their issue, and people project on society or on other people what their own struggles are.
And Will brings up 2 points that I want to touch on really quick. And going back earlier in the first hour of the show, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight was the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King was not a one-trick pony. He was not a one-issue kind of guy. He stood up for civil rights equality, race equality, as well as economic equality. He was really one of the true first revolutionary voices for the 99%, if you want to put it in today's context. And you also mentioned one more thing, Will, that I want to really mention. And it goes back to one of MLK's most famous quotes, basically, paraphrasing, "Do not judge me by the color of my skin, but rather the context of my character."
Content,
excuse me, the content
of my character.
The content.
I would add to that the quality of my ideas as well. And here's one of the sad things about our political debates these days, that instead of judging people on the quality of their ideas and the content of their characters, we have people dismissed out of hand. So, I mean, literally, when we had the audience booing a gay soldier in Iraq, my reaction was, excuse me, you who are sitting comfortably in a warm studio whose worst threat for the night, in all likelihood, is indigestion, or falling asleep in your chair, or booing someone who has actually made an oath and kept it in doing something very dangerous. I think too often we tend to see people as the other, not as human beings. I would argue that a core concept of Dr. King's belief, as well as that of Gandhi and Thoreau, was that even your enemy, whom you hate deeply, at the end of the day, you must remember that person or persons are just as human as you are.
Yep.
If you make a demon of them, you are at least making a demon of yourself.
Amen, brother.
Will, brilliant contribution to the show as always.
Awesome.
And thank you, buddy. Thank you. There are a couple other calls I want to get to them.
Can I riff on that for a second?
Yeah. Thank you, Will, bud.
Thanks so much for calling, Will. Awesome.
Go ahead, Scott. What's up?
Oh, I mean, Will is that was brilliant. I mean, because we are what we hate. You hate another. It's inherent. It's an inherent psychological trait in all human beings. You hate in others what you dislike about yourself, and so you project your hate onto those people because you hate that about yourself.
And I love cliches. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies
closer.
There you go.
But also, Will touched on morality and empathy, which was something we're deeply lacking in our society these days.
And and that kind of comes back to something that you mentioned. I mean, he was a reverend. He was a man of
MLK?
Of faith, yeah.
Right.
And I think there's a lot to be said of that. I mean, I was raised in that background, and I kind of contribute my morality to that.
Yeah, my father's a Presbyterian minister, so,
right?
And I'm not active in a church, and I'm if anything, I'm anti-organized religion. I am pro morality,
right?
But that sort of gives you the background, at least given me the background to turn the other cheek, or whatever cliche you want to use, or Bible quotes you want to use to say, do unto others, and at least try and understand the other person rather than resent them, and so on.
Happy MLK Day. We're taking your calls for the last couple of minutes. We've got time for a couple more. Give us a shout, 866-745-2667. MLK, Occupy DC. Is Darrell Issa solely behind the reason that Occupy DC could be evicted? What are your thoughts? Let's go to the lines. We've got a caller in the 224 area code. Caller, you're live on Filter Free Radio with Skeptical Scott and Jacob. Hello.
Hello, how have you been? Well, I guess you've been sick, but...
Adam, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
How's it going, buddy? Happy New Year.
Well, thank you. Had a lovely time, and I'm sorry you were sick. I meant to give you check up on you, but then I realized I didn't have your phone number on my cell phone. It was on my computer, so I was thinking about you, and I'm sorry, but...
Hey, no worries, man. I appreciate the well wishes and keeping me in your thoughts, and thank you, much appreciated. What's on your mind, man?
I've been thinking about that clip where he talks about possibly not reaching the promised land with everyone else, and I hesitate to use the word creepy, but I think he knew he was going to die. I really do.
I agree with you, Adam, and the reason I agree with you is because he says near the end of that clip, which you're referring to, you can Google this. It's basically known as the mountaintop. I've been to the mountaintop, and he basically says in the end of the clip, "I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid because." Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and like I said, I hesitate to say creepy because in actuality, a man who knows his fate and still is willing to go forward to meet it is a man worthy of the deepest form of respect you can offer. And that's why I'm like, I don't think, creepy, I mean, I can't think of a different, more appropriate word. It's just, like I said, I think he knew in his heart he wasn't going to see the fruit of his labor.
Well, he did know. Yeah, he had many death threats at that point.
Well, maybe he also looked at history and realized, Gandhi assassinated, all the people who try to bring the most amount of change to the most amount of people never lived to see the end result of their work. And, it's just like I said, he was a very honorable man. And, I wish he could have lived long enough for me to meet him because, I'm a godless heathen. I'm an atheist, but he is one of the Christians I truly and deeply respect the most.
Amen. And how different would the world be if he was still alive today?
Right. And that goes back to the New York Times article that we referenced earlier. The title that Martin Luther King would want a revolution, not a monument. Of course,
exactly.
That was right around the time when they completed the monument in Washington here. For MLK.
But also when Lyndon Johnson took the two plainclothes Secret Service agents off the detail of MLK after he gave his Vietnam speech, Johnson and Martin Luther King knew what that meant.
Right.
He knew that that Johnson was signing his death warrant, and he knew when he came out against the system as a whole that he was signing his own death warrant, and so that's sort of part of his speech, and definitely certainly and beyond Vietnam, he knew that once he turned against the system as a whole, he was no longer protected. And then that he basically signed his own death warrant. And Gandhi knew the same thing. Gandhi said, "I've achieved." I think toward the end of Gandhi's life, he said, "I've achieved everything I can achieve while I am still alive." And he is basically asking for someone to assassinate him. I mean, in a very vague way, because he knew that martyrdom would lead to, I guess, a greater perpetuation of his goals and his dreams. So. Unfortunately, that's that, and you also the second thing you touched on, Adam, too, which really jogged my memory, was the fact that that something Chris Hedges keeps saying that really discourages me is that the work we do now and any kind of effort we put towards change now will not be realized in our lifetime. And that's really a depressing thought. But we have to do it in order to perpetuate things, in order to get things to at least start to become better, because hopefully those goals will be reached at some point and someone else will carry on. But it may not happen in our lifetime. And that's really a frightening thought, and it's certainly a demotivator, but I think it's a necessary acknowledgement.
On the other side, never give up.
Right, that's actually true.
Right, and if we give up, then we'll never see the changes come about that we're fighting for. And to that point, what seeds are we planting for the next generation? What seeds what are we giving to the next? What torch are we passing on for the next generation to run with?
Shallow materialism so far.
And we totally have to set them up to make the end of the marathon, to kind of complete that crappy metaphor. Adam, I got to let you go, bud. Thanks for calling. We're almost out of time here.
Oh, yeah.
It's great to hear from you, and Will and everyone else who tried to chime in there. My
Thanks for
apologies. I didn't give enough time.
No, I can't believe the 2 hours are up already. That was fast.
Time flies when you're having fun.
I know, and I didn't even have the energy to do the show, and now I'm ready to go for a third hour.
Well, unfortunately, we're not going to do a third hour, and who knows? We'll talk about it. There's some changes. There's some things that I want to continue to move on. We're going to continue the theme of revolution all year long for this year on Filter Free Radio. And as we do wrap up the show, I want to thank, of course, you most importantly for being here with us and enjoying the program and being there.
Yeah, thanks for calling. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. I mean, everybody's Akithon was a really good example. We had so many people call in.
Oh yeah. We did that, didn't we?
Yeah, it's a big blur right now. But I think it's important for all of us to be. What's the word I'm looking for? Build a community.
Yeah.
And
start the conversation.
Start the conversation. Build a community. I think you had a really good catchphrase, Jacob, that you had.
Oh well, I was going to get there. Okay. But again, in thanking everyone, thank you, Scott, for joining me as always. I want to give a shout out and a thanks to Nicole Sandler, who makes Radio or Not possible. Tip of the hat, and always proud and honored to be on Radio or Not. Thank you to everyone else who helps make the show possible, to Dano at danosongs.com for music production. Also, my friend the Roy Burt at crownedrecords.com for music production.
Thanks to Adam, Brokehammer, Howard, JD Fishin, Johnny O, Scooter Khan, Shadow Man, Snork Y2K, Victor, and Will from Chicago, and our guests. Thank you all so much for being with us.
And thank you to the Maestro for giving us that fine piece, who we will feature next time. And on that note, happy MLK Day. Go out and participate in the solution. And at Filter Free Radio, revolution is the solution, and you can't spell revolution without love. So think about that for a minute. And we'll be back with you next week, Monday, 7 p.m. right here, filterfreeradio.com. Please check out our website. You can watch all of our shows, our podcasts, and everything for free at our website, filterfreeradio.com. Have a great week. Be back here tomorrow night for Kenny Pick. Turn up the night. Until then, we'll see you. Have a great week.
I don't know why they call this stuff hamburger helper. It does just fine by itself, huh?
This is it.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. So give me something to believe, 'cause I am living just to breathe, and I need something more to keep on breathing for. So give me something to believe.
You're listening to Jacob Dean, streaming live on the web.
The revolution will be broadcast.
We bring you the real stuff.